Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview business leaders and industry experts to share their knowledge, wisdom, and experience to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a simple insight from these business leaders or industry experts can completely change the direction on your business. In this episode, I interviewed Craig Bissett. Craig is the president of HSL, and he's also author of a new book, My Worst Hire and What I Learned from It. In this book, Craig documents stories from 50 different business leaders and mistakes they made during the hiring process, and also he shares cost of all those mistakes as well. I think you're gonna enjoy my discussion with Craig, specifically when we're talking about the common threads in these mistakes, and Craig also shares experience how to avoid some of those mistakes. But before we go, don't forget to like this video and share this video and also send us your feedback. Enjoy, have a good one, bye. This is Craig Bissett. Craig is author of My Worst Hire and What I Learned from It. And he's also president at Hiring Simulation Assessment Tools, right? Is that what it is, Craig?
Yeah, the company is called Hire Results Limited, and the process and the tool is called Hiring Simulation Assessments. That's right.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to podcast, Craig, today.
Great to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Okay. I was reading the book. I received a very interesting book. I'm not sure how you find those 50 CEOs to share their stories. One thing I like about it, not only they share a story and the mistakes, we all make mistakes when we hire people. But they also put the financial, the loss, or some sort of estimated cost, how much it cost them as well. So if you tell us a little bit about how this book came along and what inspired you to write this book.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting story. The business that we have, we spend a lot of time with CEOs and presidents, owners of companies all over North America, and it's not unusual once we built a sort of relationship up with that president CEO for him or her to take us aside and say, hey, listen, let me tell you a story. Because our business is about hiring. And let me tell you a story about a bad hire that I made. And more importantly, let me tell you what I learned from it. And we've been getting a lot, we've been doing this business for 19 years and we've been getting a lot of these stories. So I came home one day and said to my wife, I think there's a book here. We're hearing these story after stories. And so I started writing the book a few years ago. But you get so busy with business, we just had to shelve the book. And when COVID came around, our business went from like going 150 miles an hour to literally someone slammed on the brakes. Mm-hmm. Our clients didn't go away, but they put everything on hold. They had to figure out what was going on. And so for the first 2 months of COVID, myself and our team basically were sitting there twiddling our thumbs. And so I came up to the cottage and I said to my wife, I'm going to finish the book. So I got a hold of 50 different business professionals throughout North America, a couple over in Europe. And I thought it was going to be hard getting people to open up. But we didn't have a problem whatsoever. People were very interested to talk about and share. And most of the sharing is done in a generic perspective. So, they're not pinpointing the person. Yeah. But that's really how the book came to be. I wrote the book in about a month and a half, and then we self-published it. And it's been quite a success. We've been very fortunate with the book. We have people who have the book all over the world. We've had orders from Germany, Switzerland, a lot in the US. And companies, we seem to have hit a nerve. Mm-hmm. So that's how I started the book.
Yeah, if I look at the common mistakes or even the not so common mistake, I think you documented every single one of them in a book. And I think everybody has a different, but all business leaders, we all make mistakes when we're hiring people. You're never gonna be 100%. Was there something you learned that was it some surprise to you? Was the cost was surprising how much they lost by hiring the wrong people or putting something in the wrong person in place? What was the surprising?
Well, so I've been in the human capital market for a long time. I was a partner in a company before this, and we've had this for 19 years. So you think you've heard everything, But yeah, I would say there were definitely a few surprises with regards to the story. But your point about the cost, we've always known that most companies view hiring costs and mistakes of hiring costs differently. Some of them, and the majority of them, I'd say, look at it from a hard cost perspective, maybe the recruitment cost, the salary we paid out, maybe a severance, whatever. That's just a fraction of the cost. It's the opportunity cost. It's a lost client. It's a lost staff. And so when we were talking to these stories, before we asked what the cost was, we kind of framed the cost equation the way I just talked about it. And of the 50 that we interviewed, 15 of them could not put a number on it because it was so large. It was such a dramatic impact in their business. But of the 35 people who are able to put a number on it, that 35, the total cost in the book is $24 million. That's $680,000 on average per mistake. So it was some significant losses.
Wow. And it's many, many times more than a hard cost, right? Hard cost is very, very small cost. If you just simply look at that hard cost of hiring a new person, but this all the soft costs you mentioned around it, that's a much bigger cost.
Well, we have a couple interesting stories in the book. One of them is a story from Sam Reese out of California, and a well-known business professional. And he tells a story of the internal promotion of, well, really what the story is that they needed to hire a sales manager in the most critical strategic region of the country, and with the most promise. And they decided to look externally and look internally. And in his mind, he already had the person in his head who he was going to hire. It was a top salesperson in the company, which many of us know that the top salesperson usually doesn't make a good sales manager. He had all the warning signs, but he wouldn't listen to them. He had his person picked out. Bottom line is, and as he said, the interview was really more of a casual conversation. People were warning him not to hire this person. But I tell this story just on the cost side because the cost to that organization was, number one, he had to demote the sales manager back to sales. That meant that the sales manager now, who's a salesperson, their ego has been impacted. So they had lost a couple salespeople, didn't want to report to him. But the kicker was that this salesperson who was a sales manager left the organization 3 months later to a major competitor, and over the years has taken significant business. So we're talking multi-millions of dollars in that one mistake.
Wow. And talk about the morale in the team. You just killed the morale in the team. Sales, all the motivations that is so hard to build in a sales team. You just kill the whole thing just by doing that, because now it's very hard to rebuild the whole thing because people leave it.
Well, it's a good point. And if you look at the cost, and if you sum up the costs, some of them weren't able to put a dollar figure on it, but most of the individuals that we interviewed, one of the things they talked about was the cost of their reputation internally. And the way their team, the way the board, whoever the one that made the mistake and who they reported to, down the line, how they had lost some credibility within the organization for the mistake that they made, especially when the mistake was not dealt with. There's quite a few stories in the book. The whole statement, hire slow, fire quick, is a valid one. But the problem is, and with a lot of organizations, especially small ones, the kiss of death is keeping them too long. And we have many stories where the individual, not only was their reputation impacted internally for the mistake they made,
Mm-hmm.
but it was significantly impacted because they didn't do anything about it for a long time.
Mm-hmm. I see. So let's talk about one of your story in a book. I think hiring number 2, where you were working with the 2 individuals, and you were going to hire. You promoted an internal individual where they had experience, and that made sense to you. And I know it definitely made sense logically that promote somebody with experience, and the person left. If you talk about that story, Craig.
So, which story is that? I'm trying.
That's hiring number 2, where I think it's one of your story where you had 2 individuals. The first one was internally you were going to promote with experience and they know how to do the job, and one was external. And when you hire the internal one, and they left the company as soon as they hired them.
Well, I just in general, what ends up happening is, when you have internal people. We always say that if you know the person, you've almost got to put the hat on as if you don't know them. And that you don't look at what they've done in your own organization for this new role, because you tend to look at them from maybe the success that they've had within your organization, and you automatically assume that that success is going to be transferred into the new role.
Yeah.
And many times, and to your point, what your question there is that when you're looking at someone, especially in sales or any other role, the key competencies that you're looking for can be completely different than the key competencies that the individual was using. Now, that being said, and I'll maybe just reframe the question for you and maybe give you another thought on that, is that you have people in your organization that are not excelling in a role. So they're not excelling in the role many times, not because they're not a good employee, it's because they're in the wrong role. And they're not actually hitting on their key competencies. And this really falls in line with our business on the simulations, because we encourage clients to look at people, especially internally, who you may not have given them a chance, because you look at them and say, well, Mary is kind of average over there, and she's applied for this job, and I'm not sure, because she may be average over here. Well, what we've seen through simulations is that when you put them in the role of this new job, and you see how they think and how they execute strategically and tactically, all of a sudden you see a new person, because they are actually hitting on stride to their competencies compared to the job that they had. So we had a large insurance company that we used to do a lot of work with, and they used our simulations for one reason: simply advancing salespeople to sales managers. Because what their biggest problem was, most of their directors wanted to advance their top salespeople. And what we proved to them was, hey, listen, the competencies of a top salesperson typically don't align with your sales manager role. Let's actually look at your average or maybe even below average salespeople, and let's allow them to put their hand up and say, I'm interested in that role. And then what we do is we put the hat on them now, not of the role that they're in, but the hat that they're going for. And we put them in the simulations, and we actually allow that individual to start thinking and executing in that role, not interviewing for them, actually doing role plays with them.
I see.
And the client's eyes open up dramatically.
Yeah, because different skill set, managing people and delivering sales, totally different skill set, right?
Well, it is. It's one of the toughest things to do. When you read the book, I give this story at the start about living in British Columbia and panning for gold in Barkerville. This place called Barkerville.
Yeah.
And Barkerville it's this old 1800 ish a town that they've made up, and they've got horses, buggies going, and people dressed up. And I was a little kid at the time, and it was an old mining town. And the one of the things that you would do is you'd go pan for gold. And at first you think panning for gold is pretty easy. until you start doing it. And you realize it's not that easy. But more importantly is that when you start panning for gold, you end up with some nuggets that you're not sure if it's fool's gold or real gold. And we compare that to hiring, interviewing. Interviewing is extremely difficult because you don't know what's the fool's gold and what's the real gold. And the hiring of managers to run your team, it's one of the most difficult things that you can do. And the book is designed around that story of panning for gold, where those 50 stories in there are that old prospector who comes alongside you and shows you how to sift the sand out of there to get the real gold, and then to figure out which is the right one.
Yeah. While you're talking to these CEOs, Craig, did you find any common thread that, everybody made a mistake? Was there any common thread that it was a similar kind of mistakes? Did you find any commonality between all those mistakes from your experience?
Yeah, there's a few. Number one, emotion. Emotion plays such a part in hiring. And the challenge is when someone, especially depending on the size of the company, if it's a small to medium-sized company and you're dealing with the president, CEO, someone who is emotionally attached to the company, they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. They love their business. And the problem is you step in to an interview with them and all of a sudden they start liking you. Consciously or subconsciously, they're now selling you on the opportunity, and they have now let their guard down. And they've gone from what they need to be doing, meaning investigating, going deep, asking you questions to understand if you can actually execute in the role and what can, to selling you on the opportunity. And they don't even realize they're doing it.
Yeah.
So what we found is that one of the biggest elements and not only in the book, but what we see with our clients is this whole idea of the need to be able to park the emotion. Somehow, and it's hard. It is hard.
And I'm guilty of that doing many times. It's very hard.
It's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
Because you're so passionate and you start liking, but we've proven over the years how someone interviews or how much you like someone in an interview does not relate to how well they're going to do in the job. True. It just puts you in a bad situation. So we always say and coming back to your question about this common element, you need to fight the emotion. And one of the nuggets in the book has to do with and I think it's Don Simmons in the book, who has a fascinating career as a CEO. I think he's interviewed and hired 1,000+ people. But he says, what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you're not blinded by competence, or you're not blinded by someone who comes in and knows everything, and all of a sudden you are in love with the person, and you're not going deep, because someone may be very competent, but they may not be a fit for your company.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And there's another fellow, Paul Shikowski, in the book, out of Wisconsin, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and he talks about that, where his biggest mistake in his organization was, he calls it, I fell in love with the candidate. I let my guard down. And I would say to that question that you just asked, that's probably the number one issue, is the emotional element of the hire. I like you. How do I get you on the job? I don't like you. How do I get you out? So the balance to that is, and what some of the individuals say in the book is, when you start liking someone, be tougher on them. When you start kind of disliking or not sure, be easier on them, because they just may not be comfortable in the interview. But you find a candidate, and trust me, what we have found to be true is that good candidates want you to be tough. Good candidates want to know that you have a good vetting process in your organization that's allowing good people to come in, and you're weeding the bad ones out.
Yeah, that goes against the nation that, we meet somebody and we connect with the person and it's the right energy and we hire the person. Oh, we connected, so that goes against it. That's emotional piece, what you're talking about, that, hey, sometimes we meet somebody and we like the person so much. All right, then we're going to be easy. So we're going to, I'm guilty of that, Craig. That's a hard one to do. Because when
Wait, you know what? But that's, your question before, that's the common issue. There's a story in the book by Bruce Etherington, and it's about his basically hiring a personal assistant, someone to work with him.
So
and
true.
He had his team do this vetting process of all these different candidates, and they came to him with one candidate. We want you to meet this candidate. Bruce met the candidate and said, hey, we need to make this person an offer. On the weekend, he got called by a friend of his, a client of his, a good client, and said, hey, I heard you were looking for a personal assistant. I've got somebody for you. And instead of saying, I think we've got someone, in the book, he talks about, he says, I'll have coffee with them. So he has coffee with this individual on a Saturday, a half-hour coffee.
Okay.
Over a half hour, falls in love with the candidate. Shows up Monday morning, says to his staff, don't hire that person that you spent so much time with. I've got someone we need to hire. So he hired this individual. It's a great story. Hired this individual. The individual had no concept of what the job was. They just had a coffee. They phoned the person up, offered the job. The person lasted, Bruce went on a business trip, came back, and the resignation letter was on the desk 2 weeks after she started saying, I can't do this job. So it just shows you that what happens with regards to the emotion of getting excited about someone.
So emotion is one of those items. How about cultural fit or company cultural, or morale fit? Is that a part of that as well? That I'm not looking into it. This person is gonna build my culture or is gonna go against my culture, even though they were technical competent? Absolutely.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, they may be a very competent individual, but they're not a fit. And that's that whole point of Don's comment in his story, is that he was blinded by competence, but they weren't a fit for the organization, and they were self-serving. They were his company is all about process and to follow step by step by step by step. And this individual was a very competent person, but didn't want to follow process, but ensured that his staff was following process, but he didn't want to do it. And it was just a complete disconnect. And just coming back to our business on the simulation side, that's the beauty of simulations, is that because you cannot find fit in an interview. You just can't. Okay. And the candidate really doesn't understand fit and how they fit. But when you do simulations, you really start to understand how the person thinks and how they execute in the role, and how they are, because a simulation, all you're doing is you're not giving them full exposure to the job, but you're allowing them to peek around the corner. You're allowing them to kind of give a little kick on the tire, kind of look around. And we always say, there's no perfect candidate and there's no perfect client. None, there's none. Okay. And we all have warts. So, you know what? This is the time to show our warts, because we're not going to be perfect. So let's get them out in the open.
So if you can walk us through how the simulation works, Craig, is these process tools or is it assessments? How does it work if you walk it through, if you're hiring it, so what do? You bring people in and then you put them through simulation. How does that work?
Yeah, so our simulations are real-time, face-to-face simulations. It's not online. It's not a psychometric assessment. It is, so the methodology that we have is when we work with a client, the first thing we do is what's called a performance indicator meeting. And that's a list of questions that are customized to the client, because everything's customized, that really starts to understand the most critical elements of the job. What's the number one, number two, number three, number four critical things? It's 80-20 rule, right? And what do they look like? And then what our team does is that they take that information and then we go and design simulations or activities to allow candidates to engage with each other. So for example, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Let's say you're hiring a senior manager and they have 5, 6 direct reports.
Okay.
And the challenge in the job, one of the key things that this person has to do is they have to be a good coach. They've got to be able to come alongside and deal with issues and be able to be tough when they have to be tough, but also empathy when they need empathy. And that has been a challenge for them in the past, where they have this group of managers that just need a good coach, mentor, as someone to work with.
Okay.
So one of the simulations that we would design is a coaching session. And it would be a real life coaching session. So that candidate would come into a simulation with a few of the hiring team and actually be put in the mindset. They received the material before
Okay.
through our system, and they come in the mindset that they're the manager, and there's 4 or 5 issues that they have to deal with, or those issues come up in the coaching situation. And we want to see, where does this person and how does this person deal with the individual, deal with the, and then we have competencies based, from it, we have a whole scoring tool that goes with that. But that's just one real simple example of a simulation. But what ends up happening with the simulations is that if and when you hire someone who's gone through the simulations, day one is not day one anymore. They show up, and they're not showing up kind of sitting at their desk going, okay, so now what you want me to do? Or where's my orientation, which is important, onboarding is critical.
Yeah.
But really what you've done is you force them into due diligence beforehand.
I see.
So they have so the idea is, how do we reduce the surprises as much as possible? There'll still be surprises, but how do we reduce the surprises as much as possible on both parties?
How about a decision-making process? If you run a simulation, is it, I'm not sure it's the same as a disc profile, but the goal is a similar way, have some sort of report so easy for people to make decisions on,
Yeah. So our reporting system is actually, it's really simple. We wanted to make it complex, but our client said, no, keep it simple. And here, there's nothing against psychometric. We believe in the psychometric tools.
Okay.
We believe that's part of the hiring equation. You don't just hire someone on a psychometric response or how they interviewed. You don't just hire them on how they did in the simulations. It's kind of this equation. And each component of the equation, you can put a weight to it. We tend to put, a heavier weight on the simulations and a lighter weight on the psychometric, but it all brings it together. So when a candidate goes through our simulations, we have up to 5 competencies per activity or simulation.
Okay.
When the candidate has finished the activity, the hiring team actually goes on their handheld and they simply score the candidate with this weighted competencies process. And it's all defined. So, everyone's singing from the same song sheet, and the candidate scores themselves. And the system then throws up on a graph how the candidate viewed themselves and how the team saw them in all these different activities. And then the system then compares all the candidates compared to each other and how they saw each other and how big the gaps are. So you then have this pretty, what I'd say, logical view, not emotional view of the candidate. And our system can also put a score on the interview, and we can put a weight to that score. Our system can put a score onto the psychometric and a weight to that, a score and a weight to our simulations, and maybe even a score and a weight to the reference. So the reference, many times we don't put more than 10% weight on it.
I see.
And then it comes out with this number and we get a graph, and it simply compares the candidate to other candidates. And that's what we provide, and we talk to the client. And visually, it really helps them, because when we started, we're doing this for a long time, but when we started to get a little more complex with our reporting, the hiring teams would say, don't do that, because on our psychometrics, we get this long 10, 15 page report. We read one page, and that's the summary.
Yeah.
We don't,
Just to make a
very
decision.
rarely we go deeper than that.
Yeah.
So,
Couple issues I will talk about, typically to my industry, but, I wanted to run by you, see what are your thoughts on now? First one, does people, especially in my tech industry, a lot of people from overseas come in, does cultural background or their different education system where they're coming from, does that make an impact on your assessment? Or do they come in the same way that any other, North American or Canadian?
Yeah. You know what? When someone's coming from a different culture, I'm going to tell you, in an interview and even in a simulation, you're going to be to a disadvantage. No question. It's a fact that you're coming from a completely different culture, and how you maybe even approach the process and how they, because you would know definitely in your business that, some professionals come from countries where you address your supervisor by Mr.
Yeah.
It's,
East Asia countries. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that being said, these simulations will definitely outweigh and be to the advantage of someone from outside of our culture, because it's getting to the core of their thinking, their execution. But without a doubt, it is a challenge, especially if someone who has just arrived, now, it really depends the countries they're coming from. But I would say from a managerial perspective, very difficult. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I would say, that North American, maybe Canada more than probably the US, have to wake up to. In the sense of, I mean, the level of professionals that are coming into the country, I mean, they're outstanding, brilliant. I mean, successful, if you look at their resume and their achievements. But I'm going to tell you, it's difficult sometimes getting hiring teams to even look at them.
Yeah. One is the cultural thing you mentioned. Second thing is, how do you verify those skills? Somebody comes to a resume, education is a different country, experience is in different countries. How do you verify the skill set that this person has, a skill set? So, that's where the challenge comes in my industry, especially, every resume you look at, they have every skill they listed. How do you verify that?
Yeah. Well, in your case, if you had the time, you'd probably get them all the right code or get a whatever and start looking at their code, because that's basically a simulation. But in the world that we're in, about 50 to 60% of our revenue base is sales management, senior sales. Why? Because they're just so difficult to hire. The balance is mid-level to senior level executives. Like right now, we're just finishing up a project with a CEO of a fascinating startup where they're raising money. And that's a really good example of counting the cost of the mistake, because the mistake is amplified into the investment community if you make a mistake in your CEO. So those organizations, they're attracted to what we do because they can actually go to the investment firm or the investment community, it could be angel investors or whoever, and say, hey, we are hiring a CEO, but we have a risk management tool in place to help us manage that risk. We're not 100%. I can tell you that right now. Definitely not 100%, but we're dramatically different than the traditional way of hiring.
Well, any help you can use, right? So, when you make a decision, any little bit help, information you can get or help you can get, all adds up to making the right decision, right?
Well, yeah, we call it the human capital risk management equation. So, our definition of risk management is simply providing additional information that you wouldn't receive through traditional means to make a better decision. all you're doing is saying, okay, through traditional means, I'm going to get this much of whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're saying our risk management tool is taking you from this to whatever, giving you that much more. And, I used the term before, but it really is like kind of looking around the curtain. At the same time, our belief is that clients need to be aware of the impact of a hiring decision on a person. The ramifications of a bad hire in an organization, obviously it's monetary, but you're going to recover.
Mm-hmm.
The ramifications of a bad hire and a mistake in a family is significant. So when we work with our clients, we make them well aware that, hey, listen, you're paying for our services. We're going to do our best to help you manage the risk, but I want to make sure you understand that we're as much for helping the candidate manage their risk as you. Because a hiring decision, two things happen. Life gets better, or if it gets worse, it doesn't stay the same. And when an employee joins you, they show up at the door with a bag over their shoulder with a bunch of stuff. They have financial concerns, marital issues, kid issues, whatever it is. The last thing we want to do is have them join you, and a week down the line, they're scratching their head and they're dumping a bunch of other stuff in their bag going, what have I done?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, that's not a good state for employer or employee, if that it comes to.
So we really make it clear to the client that if you could just only see the family that you can positively impact or potentially destroy, because there's nothing worse than a husband or a wife losing their income and the impact of that internally in the family. So if you have a family of a husband and a wife and you have 3 kids, you now are affecting 5 people on a bad decision.
Yeah. If you think it that way, that's much bigger impact. You're holding somebody's career back. It just the transition person go through.
Yeah. So one of the things that we always talk to our client about, in the sense, when we get pulled into a project, one of the questions we'll ask is, so if you make a hiring mistake, do you have any idea the cost? And that's when we kind of come up with that equation of the cost. But then we also come back and talk about the family and say, so we just want to make sure you understand is that the person that you end up hiring is that they've got a family. And you have to understand that the way our business works, it's all about building healthy family units at home and helping them make better decisions, so that we're in your camp to help you get the best person. But at the same time, because through our simulations, we've had candidates go through the simulations and go, whew, thank goodness I went through that simulation. This isn't for me. And we want that.
See, so, but if you can take care, as an employer, if you can take care of all the financial issues for employees, all the as you mentioned, the bag they bring in, if they take, if you can take care of all those, everything's, checks and places, how do you test that the person, when he's taken care, can go above and beyond what you hiring work, they can deliver the result? Are you able to, with a simulation, look that far as well, that if I make the right decision, I take care of all that, what I should be taking care of, well, can that person has that motivation, has that drive that they can pull forward with the what's energy?
Yeah. So 2 things on that. One is, I think that's the importance of that hiring equation.
Okay.
So the hiring equation, if you think of the hiring equation, the initial interview, kind of getting to who they are, the psychometric. If you bring a psychometric in, that's going to tell you a little bit about their personality and maybe some concerns about their personality, or how they maybe treat people or how they manage. The simulations are going to give you practical insight into the strategic and tactical work, and the references. So through all of this, and what we, especially on the references and the simulations, some of the things that you start to see in the simulations, that you may have a really good candidate, but there's a few things that you're concerned about. this is where you can take that information and now make it a logical next decision in your reference. So you're not just calling for a reference, but you're now pinpointing maybe some issues that you potentially or concerns that you may have to see what the reference says. So you're not just saying to the reference, so what do you think of this person? Would you hire the person again? But you're saying, one of the things that we noticed in this person is that when they did this or whatever, we noticed that. Can you tell me how you viewed that on the job? So the idea is to kind of look at the person holistically. So to answer your question, at the end of the day, you're gaining data, not emotion, and you're making a decision more on data. Emotion's going to be there, no question. But you want to be that as little as possible. Yeah. But you want to have as much data as you can. And most companies, when they hire, this is an interesting stat. We did a survey quite a while ago, and we asked a bunch of hiring managers, why did you hire that last candidate? 81% said we hired them. Basically, their answer was we hired them because we liked them. Okay. Yeah. Next question. Of the people that you hired that you liked, what percent did you know that they could execute in the most critical elements of your job? About the same percent were basically saying, not really sure, waiting for them to show up to show us. That's kind of rolling the dice. And you're rolling the dice with not only your business, but you're rolling the dice with the candidate's life as well. Yeah, all around. So here's one of the biggest challenges I see, Craig. I want to run by you and see what are your thoughts on that. Business presidents I deal with, CEOs I deal with, in my industry, they're hiring up people that technical people or business analysts or technical staff, but they don't possess that skill set and they don't know how to verify that skill set because that's not their expertise, right? They have to manage these people in the longer run as well. What I see hesitation from business leaders hiring the staff and IT department staff or CIOs or IT managers, IT directors hiring their staff, hesitation there, but also making the wrong decisions all the time. I see that plays out very there are some great people doing a great work, but just not the right match sometimes, right? So I see the hesitation because technology intimidates a lot of business leaders. They just don't want to get involved in that, and they don't have a means of verifying the skill set. But they have to also not only hire these people, they have to manage these people as well. I see big challenge with these individuals. So, any thoughts from your perspective? How they should be approaching this thing? That's a tough one. You're talking more on because you're talking in a world that we don't deal a lot in, and that's on the technical side. And we don't deal in that world for a few reasons. One being very much what you described. I see. Because I come from that world, my last business. But even in a generally speaking, Craig, if I'm not a lawyer, but I run a law firm, I'm a president of the law firm. If I need to hire a lawyer, I don't possess a skill set. So how do I go about it? If I'm not an engineer, but I run a manufacturing business, because I have a business background, how do I go about it? Because I'm hiring people that not possess that, I don't possess a skill set that I don't have a means of verifying it. Well, first of all, you have to have some sort of mechanism in place to allow you to verify that, because if you're not able to verify it, trust me, you're going to have the wool pulled over your eyes 100-fold, because not only do people put everything on their resume, but there's a lot of people who, what I call, are surface interviewers or veneer interviews. They have all the terminology, they have all the right words and whatever they have, but they don't have the practical skills underneath. So I would say that if you're a CEO president and you don't have those skills to assess them, you've got to either hire someone internally who has that ability to do that, or you've got to outsource that ability to do that. but yeah, that's a very interesting one, because if you don't know what you're looking for,
How do you do that? Yeah.
how do you
It's
know what you're hiring?
a very common mistake in my industry. It's very common, and I see people
Wow.
get stuck with that. And then you have that the staff, the talent on your team for 3-4 years. Then now you don't know what to do with it. You cannot. Now you're taking advice from it. It's a very common in my industry.
Well,
I'm sure it's other industries suffer the same.
I'm not sure how that could happen if the person who has been hired, who's there for 3 years, who's not competent in the job, how that cannot be recognized internally within the team.
It's a challenge, right? So it's always a challenge, even though you recognize, but you don't know what to do about it, right? So because
Well, one of the things that we talked about, and we've got three. I talk about 3 quick stories on it, and that is the hire slow, fire quick. It's the kiss of death.
Yeah.
Having someone who is in your organization and they just can, because sometimes not making a decision of getting rid of someone is the easy decision.
Yeah, it is a decision, but it's an easy one.
It's the easy one. It's the
Yeah.
easy one. Oh, I'll just, I'll deal with it next week.
Yeah.
And next week becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. To me, the way I would be approaching a president about that would be simply the opportunity cost of having the wrong person in the role.
Yeah.
And because, well, I'm not a programmer, but or a business analyst, but I do know when I was in that world, 20 plus years ago, there is a significant difference between a average, good, and superior programmer
Definitely.
analyst. There's I can't remember what the number is, but someone who is, a real strong programmer compared to an average programmer, it's not like 2 times more. I think it's like 4, 5, 6 times more efficient and proficient in the role. I would be, if in your case, I don't know if that's in your business to actually identify the issues and bring that to light because that's a touchy subject in itself.
Yeah, definitely. Everything in HR is a touchy, right?
It's a touchy subject, but
yeah,
really it's all about opportunity costs.
Definitely. And
it's all about lost opportunities.
And I see the impact on a businesses, business held back because of this kind of decisions, process. So, that's what I was, and I spent a lot of time with the president, the CEOs, just trying to coach them. Hey, let's look at this way, maybe look at this way. So there's so many opportunities in that area. Let's talk about COVID. How do you see that anything change in a hiring process or anything change in your business world? Craig, how do you see the COVID impact?
Oh, COVID's changed our world. Some for the better, some for the worse. Our simulations when COVID arrived, up until that point in 19 years, we had probably conducted 5 simulations in 19 years over video.
I see.
Everything was done face to face.
Okay.
And it was done that way, not that we didn't want to do it, our clients didn't want to do it. And it's funny how something like COVID changes the minds of clients. So our business stopped for 2 months and then it picked up again. Our clients didn't go away, they just had to figure out what to do. Okay. But all of our simulations for the last 18 months have been the way we're doing it. We use Zoom, we use Microsoft Teams. And I'm going to tell you, it's been an eye opener for our clients, and it's been an eye opener for us. So, for example, we just finished a project in New York City.
Okay.
And the way we used to do it, one of our people would have to fly down to New York City. 2 of the hiring teams would have to have flown into New York City to their head office. And I think one of the candidates would have had to flown in out of the 3.
Okay.
through Zoom, I think we accomplished almost everything we could have done in face-to-face. Now, the person that they hired, they ended up bringing and having dinner with them. But no one jumped on a plane. And as you know, the inefficiencies of travel. So that has been a real positive in the sense of that. At the same time, I think technology and hiring outside of just doing this is really COVID and this type of technology is really pushing company to AI and using data to make decisions, which from an efficiency perspective sounds great. It really concerns me.
Can you effectively do the same quality of assessment or
I don't think so. Because AI definitely there's some real valid reasons why you want to use it for specific reasons, but and for situations. But hiring people, you're dealing with people, and just because you don't have certain words on your resume, because now what everyone's doing is they're jamming their resumes with all these different, trying to figure all these different words to get into the resume so the AI system picks it up and doesn't shoot them out. That's a concern. But with regards to COVID, here's the issue of COVID. And there's article after article after article from reputable consulting companies talking about these two issues. One is the pent-up desire for candidates to leave. They haven't been able to leave. They didn't want to leave for the last 18 months. Many of them have now discovered a new life. Oh my goodness, you know what? I actually have a life. I don't have to jump in my car and whatever. So companies are obviously having to change how their hoteling works within their companies now. But one is this potential mass movement of people and how that's going to impact. But at the same time, there's a pent-up desire internally within organizations going, you know what? Boy, we wanted to get rid of Peter 18 months ago, but we couldn't get rid of him because we needed him, but maybe it's time to get rid of Peter.
Wow.
So there is, and if you read up on the expected moves over the next 2 to 3 years, it's significant. And then also about COVID, just in the sense of work, where you work, remote work, and the differencing opinions of our clients on should we have our people coming back into the office full-time? Should they come in for 2 days a week? We're working with an organization that we worked with for the last 9 years, where up until COVID, they would not allow their people to work from home.
A lot of companies, a lot of companies wouldn't allow that. Yeah.
They now have gone to 3 days at home, 2 days flex. You pick the days that you want to come to, but you'll have to sign in before you come in. Unheard of within this organization. But then we have other companies that are in the quote large consulting worlds where they're going to be demanding their people to come back because of the collaboration that they need face to face. So that in itself will be an interesting thing to view on, do I want to go back to the office? Don't force me, because there's now so many options. It's going to be a very interesting next 2 to 5 years in human capital.
We were going through hiring process last couple of weeks. We were just screening candidates, and the first question we were asked most of the time was, candidate, is it an at-home job or is it we have to go back to office? That was the first question.
Number one question, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you think of, on the street that I live on, we have a bunch of bankers and the guy across the street who's a high-end trader, who up until COVID left his house at 5 o'clock in the morning, got home at like 6:30 at night, young kids, very successful guy. the organization that he worked with immediately had to figure out, how do we get these people working at home and keep to the regulations of the financial world? Well, they figured it out really quick. And this guy has basically said to me, Craig, I've discovered I have a life. There's life outside of my office.
Yeah.
So if he ever gets pulled back in, I think this guy do end up doing something else.
Yeah. A lot of people did that, you figure out, hey, listen, you could be productive while you're working at home, instead of going to an office. So I think there's too many sides to this, and we're going to see how it plays out eventually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Very interesting. So perspective time, I enjoyed this book. I loved reading those stories from people, and they were so generous to share their stories. I will recommend all the, business leaders are watching this podcast to, I'm going to include a link to this book just below the video as well. So reach out to you and order a book and go through it.
Yeah.
One thing I find is lessons learned. You go through all those 50 CEO stories in the book, and you see that, some of the mistakes you already make and some of the mistakes you haven't made yet. It gives a little bit different perspective on that. Hey, you may be making this mistake. So next time when you're going through it, maybe it alerts you a little bit. Hey, don't go this way. Maybe find a different way, different approach to it.
Yeah. Well, some of the stories in the book, they've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And especially on small companies, the impact on small companies are significant. So yeah, that's the whole idea, for it to be a resource, to be an easy read. And but yeah, thank you.
Okay. I learned a lot from your discussion. It was eye-opener. You shared a lot of perspective. I enjoyed our discussion. Where can people find you, Craig, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can buy the book online. You can go to our website, to the book website, myworsthire.com, just as it sounds, myworsthire.com, and buy it there. You can go to Amazon, or you can buy it anywhere online. But with regards to myself, the best website is hiringsimulation.com, just as it sounds, hiringsimulation.com. And my email is simply craig@hiringsimulation.com.
Okay, I'll include those information just below the videos when we send that to the client. And I'll recommend anybody who's looking for discussion on hiring, reach out to you and have a chat with you. Definitely eye-opener, many different perspectives.
Well, listen, it's been a real pleasure. You've done a great job in this interview. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for your time, okay? Have a good one.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye now.
Bye.